So let's go back to the mid-air collision that happened back on January the 29th. It involved a helicopter, and we have up to that point had a lot of helicopter traffic up and down the Potomac, and particularly on what we now know as Route 4. But there had been recommendations, I'm assuming, made previously about the combination of helicopter traffic and passenger jet service flying into and out of Reagan National Airport. Had there been recommendations on helicopter traffic, specifically with regard to Route 4, which is right across the Potomac?
We had not issued any recommendations regarding Route 4, but certainly as part of this investigation, that is one of our big focus.
So when you did your investigation, there were some pretty alarming conclusions made. Perhaps most alarming to me was the number of times, and I think this went back to like 2021, I can't remember, but 4 or 5 years, that the number of times where the separation horizontally and the separation vertically was very dangerous. And as I understand it, in vertical separation, less than 75 feet. So can you speak to the conclusions that your team has come up with in researching serious incidents prior to?
Yes, and what we did is we looked at FAA surveillance data and then voluntary reporting system data. So that's reporting from pilots, reporting from air traffic control. Those are voluntary reporting systems. And then there's a mandatory reporting system for occurrences in air traffic control. And what the data showed us is that there were 15,214 close proximity events from 2021 through 2024 at DCA between helicopters and planes.
When federal agencies respond to your recommendations across the spectrum of them, not just particularly this case, what are the hesitancies involved in? Because I'm assuming they don't accept all the recommendations. They don't implement all of the recommendations. What are the various, and I'll use the word excuses, but what are the various reasons why many of the things that are recommended by the NTSB never find their way into certain protocols?
Sometimes they'll use cost.
Cost.
That they'll say the cost is not justified by the benefits. I will say one thing that we're looking at as part of this investigation is ADSB out and ADSB in. ADSB out is required for commercial aircraft and has been since 2020, but ADSB in is not required. We've been on record since 2008 that ADSB in should be mandated, but the FAA has used costs as a reason not to mandate that. What that would have done or could have done, and we'll look at that as part of this investigation, is the CRJ, the plane, had ADSB out. It did not have ADSB in, though American does have some Airbus planes that do have ADSB in that could have provided them some information about the helicopter positioning and flight path. But that information was not available to them. We'll look at how ADSB in could have helped as well as out, including in air traffic control throughout our investigation.
Of all of the data-driven conclusions that were made, including the vertical and horizontal separation, what was most alarming to you?
I think what is most alarming to me, well, two things, that you had reporting over years. In fact, there was reporting there was data going back to 2011 that traffic collision alerts were going off monthly as a result of close proximity to helicopters, and that's from 2011 through 2024. And so for me, all this data is being collected by FAA from operators, from others, from voluntary reporting systems. Where is that data going to trend potential accidents and incidents in the future? The next accident is in the data right now. And what are we doing? to figure out what that is. The other most alarming to me is how nobody figured out, based on the glide slope going into runway 33, that if you look at the helicopter route, that there's only 75 feet of separation between a plane coming in to runway 33 max. That's 75 feet max. That route doesn't have lateral boundaries. And in fact, in this case, the helicopter was to the right of the route. So it's a very small margin for error.
You had indicated that there had been 1,500 near collisions near the airspace around the Reagan Airport. Is that for the last couple of years? Did I hear that right?
15,214 close proximity events. That doesn't mean that they were near collisions, but close proximity events where the vertical and lateral separation was too small of a margin.
Yeah.
That was dating back to 21?
21 to 2024.
Right. Did your organization make observations about how to improve those particular threats of safety?
We just issued urgent recommendations to the FAA, which they did swiftly adopt, to prohibit helicopter traffic while planes are landing or departing on runway 15 and runway 33, and to determine an alternative route that could be in use while aircraft are coming in on that runway.
May I ask, when were those recommendations made? Was that after this particular collision?
That was on March 11th. We issued urgent safety recommendations as a result of our investigation.
So that's after the collision?
Yes.
Even though this has been a problem, this sort of proximity issue has been a problem since at least 2021 that we've been tracking. Is that right?
We were not tracking that. As part of our investigation, we got that data from FAA as part of our investigation, and that's what we were able to begin basing our urgent safety recommendations on.
Thank you.
I first want to start out, you mentioned that you had issued a urgent safety recommendation to close Route 4 on March the 11th. There was a previous recommendation to close Route 4 through the end of March, as I understand it. How long is this urgent safety recommendation going to be in place?
So the Route 4 closure was actually FAA's decision. That's something that Secretary Duffy did voluntarily to address safety once this collision occurred. That was going to be in place until March 31st, and he was waiting to get our preliminary report to see what we came up with. So we were in close communications, and as a result of that, we did identify some serious safety issues and issue that urgent safety recommendation to close that.
And do you know, is that in effect in perpetuity, or what time frame will that be in effect?
Secretary Duffy has adopted the recommendations, and my understanding is right now it is permanent. But certainly it is up to them if they want to look for an alternative route.
Great. And one last quick question before my time expires. You mentioned there's currently over 1,000 open recommendations that you all have made as a result of your investigations. Can you tell us how the NTSB coordinates with DOT and other agencies on these recommendations? You said you don't have enforcement authority, nor do you want it, regulatory oversight, but tell us how you make sure that these recommendations are actually being adopted.
So we have a safety recommendations team. Actually, most of our recommendations don't go to federal agencies. Most of them are to the entities that may be involved with our investigations, or say a local fire department or state responders. There might be state police. So we issue recommendations to many different entities. And throughout the investigation, our biggest hope is we don't issue a safety recommendation, that they improve safety through the investigation. But we do have an entire team focused on implementing our safety recommendations, and they meet quarterly with, say, the federal agencies to figure out how they're meeting them. One thing people don't realize is just because we issue a safety recommendation doesn't mean you're stuck with that safety recommendation. We are open to an alternative. PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, and DOT is an expert at this. They come back and say, we can't do this because we're not going to be able to implement it this way. How about we do it this way? And then we reconsider the recommendation and say, great, that's an alternative that will meet the intent of that recommendation. So we actually encourage, when we talk about cost, we encourage agencies and others to come back to us with some alternative. It doesn't mean we know everything about their operations. They may know something we don't know. So please tell us, is there a different way to do it?
I can only imagine what your break room is like when new technology, emerging technology, and I'm talking about things like drones, vertical takeoff and landing, driverless cars and trucks, things that could pose a threat to the transportation safety of this country and the world. Can you look into your crystal ball and tell us where the next real threats are going to come from that could cause your agency to have to be spun up and conduct another major investigation?
I mean, it could really happen in any mode of transportation. Certainly, there are emerging technologies in each mode of transportation, many of which you mentioned. But our agency is ready. We have technology ourselves, but we're constantly evolving. As new technology comes out, we have needs there as well. We're making sure that our employees are ready from a standpoint of training. We do want to increase our investment in training for our employees. But it's tough to say in my crystal ball because I look across all modes of transportation and see that there could be significant disasters in any of those modes. What I will say, and I know there's been a lot of focus on aviation, our biggest contributor to fatalities right now in transportation is on our roads. Over 40,000 people are dying on our nation's roads every year, millions injured. You know, we talk about transportation accidents as single accidents, but every day, an average of 112 people are dying on our roads. 112 people, and we don't blink an eye. There is so much we have to do to improve road safety across the U.S., and we have so many recommendations on that. If we can get that number down, that would be significant. That's 95% of all transportation fatalities.
Well, let me just put it this way. I'm haunted by the fact that talked about tragedy in Washington here. There was only one controller in the tower when it happened. That's the reporting. I have no idea whether or not that's true, and I understand that from the reporting that that was not unusual. But you talked about two pilots. I don't know. Is it true there was only one at the time?
No, there were 5 at the time in the tower. There were 9 on duty. What you might be referring to is the combining of positions. There were 6 at one point during the day before 3:40 p.m., where actually it could have been 7 because they combined the position for clearance delivery and flight data, which is not uncommon, but they did combine positions for the helicopter position and the local traffic position into one. The person didn't leave, so it went down to 5 controllers at the time of the accident. That combined position was at 3:40 p.m. It stayed that way. The person went on break, came back into rotation at 4:27 p.m. But in total, there were 9 people on duty that day.
There were 9 people in the tower? I'm not talking about
5 in the cab.
at the time of the accident.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I don't know why that reporting is out there, but it's been out there pretty extensively, and I've been haunted by that. In talking with them, air traffic controllers, they tell me that they are tremendously understaffed. Tremendously understaffed. I don't understand how this country will tolerate air traffic controllers being tremendously understaffed. There's a problem with that I would hope that in your reporting of your studies that you will take a look outside of your silo and see what is happening with air traffic controllers and make some recommendations as to what we ought to be doing.
So
That, to me, is a very serious problem.
we have a number of investigators that focus on air traffic control at the NTSB. As part of this investigation, we have an entire investigative group focused on air traffic control. They're going to be looking at everything from staffing to changes in staffing over time at DCA to whether there should be more staffing. They'll look at operations at DCA in total and over time. So they are former air traffic controllers that are working on this, and it will be part of our investigation.